Welcome to the Rich Answers podcast. I'm Lynn Townsend. This podcast produced by Carroll Vassar-Pettit on behalf of Cause Communications and the Conference of Churches, Hartford, Connecticut. And our guest today is Ted Carroll. He's the Executive Director of Leadership Greater Hartford. Our topic is leadership. So, Ted, what is leadership?
Well, actually, the definition we use at Leadership Greater Hartford is a very simple one. And that is giving your best to the work of the group and helping others to do the same. So it's a simple answer, but it's a complex task. Often we break the task into 5 different practices. We borrow heavily from the work of Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner. So if I may, I'll just identify the 5 practices that they have offered us, which frankly have tracked with my own experience, both personally trying to do leadership, but also in observing others in leadership roles. So the 5 practices are these. First and foremost, it's about modeling the way. And that simply means that you do what you say you're going to do, that you practice what you preach, that you walk the talk. That ends up being the first and foremost practice, because without it, you're not going to get very far as a leader. Because imagine those people who don't follow through on their commitments. If they don't do what they say they're going to do, people will lose faith, they'll lose trust, they'll lose confidence, and they're not likely to follow you. So that's why that's the first practice. The second one is called inspiring a shared vision. And that is where you connect your values, those that you care about, with the values and aspirations of others. The third practice area is what we call challenging the process. This is a distinguishing quality of leadership because leaders change things. They're restless people. They look at things that are wrong and they want to right them. They look at things that are missing and they want to create them. They look at things that shouldn't be and they want to remove them. So they are people who are willing to take risks. They are pioneers. They will experiment. They will fail. But they'll get back on the saddle and keep moving forward. A fourth practice area we talk about is called empowering others to act. In other words, leadership is not a solo game. The best leaders are those who know how to identify and develop and connect the leadership talents and skills of other people. And finally, the leadership practice that would track very well with the Conference of Churches and other faith-based institutions is something called encourage the heart. This was a bit of a surprise when I came across it, but it made perfect sense as I reflected on it. The best leaders are those who inspire confidence in other people, who demonstrate appreciation for other people, who genuinely love other people. Love not in the romantic sense, but love in the sense of really deeply caring about someone else and putting their interests above your own. And when people feel that cared for, they will follow you. And ordinary people will tend to do extraordinary things when they know that their efforts are recognized, appreciated, and when they know that in the end, the leader will do whatever he or she can do to advance their interests. They, in turn, will follow suit.
Are leaders born or are they created?
Well, obviously, every leader who's ever lived has been born.
Okay, fair enough.
But we believe that more than just a question of genetics, leadership is something that is learned. We believe further that the capacity to lead resides within everybody. Obviously, not everybody chooses to lead. Not everybody chooses to do the work required to have leadership effectiveness. For those who do choose, for those who do have the courage and the confidence to lead, they can become better really by working on those 5 practices that I spoke about earlier. It's all about behavior. And if we commit ourselves to engaging in certain behaviors, we can, each of us, all of us, become strong, effective leaders.
Now, throughout history, we've seen leaders who have excelled in positive ways, and we've seen leaders who have, I don't want to use the word excelled, but who have become prominent and have taken us down some very dark paths as people, as human beings, as history has shown us. There are some bad leaders out there too. How do you distinguish between the two? Is it as obvious as the difference between a Genghis Khan and a Martin Luther King?
Yeah, because the practices themselves in many ways are the same. The distinguishing factor is around values. What is it you really care about? You may have values that you and I might view as immoral, but if you engage in the leadership behaviors that I've just talked about, you might get other people to follow you. So the question really is, what do you stand for? What fundamentally are you all about? I'm a community organizer by training, and I say the same thing. There's nothing inherently good about community organizing. It's about what are you organizing for, toward what end. So it's the same thing with leadership. What are you leading people to? For what end? And so that matters. What you stand for matters. And again, it's why the faith community needs to be very involved in these questions, because the best of the members of the faith community can help articulate what does matter. Our philosophy is akin to what some people have called servant leadership. That is, acting in ways that ensure that those who are the most vulnerable will be served by the actions that you take as a leader, where you help them to become stronger, more autonomous, more likely themselves to become servant leaders. If that's your goal orientation, if that's your motivation, we want to support that. We certainly want to encourage that and teach that in the work that we do.
And people will follow. And I immediately thought of Jesus Christ. He was a servant leader. I mean, you don't wash other people's feet if you are not a servant leader.
Jesus Christ did a beautiful job of modeling the way. And actually, at my own church, Asylum Hill Congregational Church, the leaders of that church will be getting together a couple of Saturdays from now, and we will be talking about the concept of servant leadership and how Jesus Christ was actually the premier servant leader. So we'll explore that question further.
And one of the things that the Conference of Churches believes is that Jesus is a transformational leader, one of the history's most prominent transformational leaders.
Absolutely. He was not about making minor adjustments to the status quo. He offered an entirely new way of thinking, an entirely new way of behaving, an entirely new way of believing. That was, as we know, pretty unsettling for those in power at the time. And as we know, when people in power get unsettled, they can get kind of brutal.
Right.
And he knew that. He actually predicted it, and he did it anyway, which is another testament to what leaders do. They understand the risks, and it's not as though they have no fear, but they do it anyway because it's the right thing to do.
Right, and we've seen that in so many religions, not just Christianity. I'm thinking of Gandhi,
yes,
who also led the way, lived the servant leader life, and laid his life on the line for it. So that is not to say that Jesus is the only one, but there are many across many denominations.
Indeed, there are a tremendous number of servant leaders, prophets of all faith backgrounds, of all cultures, in all time. And God was very good in providing us a whole lot of different people who were able to show us the way. Jesus Christ was among them, to be sure, and for many, the principal way. But in other parts of the world, there are others.
Very principled leaders who model that as well. Let's talk a little bit about Leadership Greater Hartford. Sure. What is Leadership Greater Hartford? How long has it been around? And you talked about your principal ways of creating leaders. How's that going for you?
Well, I think it's going very well. This year we're celebrating our 35th anniversary year.
Congratulations.
I've been privileged to serve in the role I play as president of Leadership Greater Hartford for the last 25 years, actually, and was even further privileged to have been a participant in the class in 1985. Served with or participated with about 50 other young men and women who I've come to know and enjoy. And
tell me, what do you mean by the class? As people who aren't familiar with Leadership Greater Hartford, what do you mean by that?
Thank you. Every year, of course, at this point, Leadership Greater Hartford has a number of programs, but the one program we're known principally for is called Quest. That is for people who are young and mid-career professionals, some of whom are on the rise, others of whom are already in senior-level positions. And they come from every sector imaginable in the community. They are from the nonprofit community, they're from the business community, they're from government, they're from the academic and faith sectors. What we want to do is reflect the broad variety of leaders that exist within our region. And we connect them, getting them to know each other and to know this Hartford community better. And then we engage them, help them find projects where they can work together to help bring about change. And we have every year about 4 community building projects that people work on and make advances on and celebrate great accomplishments. This past year, one of the most recognized efforts was one where we worked with Hartford Public High School on a play called Xana Don't that focused on the bullying that happens among teenagers. It was actually a play that got quite a bit of notoriety because it featured the gay-lesbian question and got national and international recognition. But what we helped to do is surface some of those difficult issues, found a way to talk about it, found a way to express ourselves about it, and hopefully built relationships and dialogue that will extend well beyond the year. We now have about 3,500 people who've participated in one program or another over those last 35 years, and we hope to go strong for at least another 35.
Can you name maybe 4 or 5 who our listeners might recognize?
Let's see. Well, the former chairman and CEO of the Hartford, Ramani Iyer, I think he was in one of our first classes, as a matter of fact. We've had a managing partner of Reed and Riga, Greg Sylvester, who was a member of my class as well. So these are individuals whom I've had the opportunity to work with over a long span of, and I've had the opportunity to work with literally hundreds of others. And the good news is every year there are another couple or 300 people who present themselves. Some are in high school, some are just finishing up their college years as young professionals, some are on the rise in their organizations, some are executives, some are retired. And we have programs for all of them. And the very hopeful part of all of this is that we have as many programs to help develop people's community leadership skills as any area in the country does. That is exciting. The civic health of our community will grow as a consequence.
It's important that people know about that. I think there are some times when we forget what great resources that Hartford has, resources like Leadership Greater Hartford and the graduates of the so many programs that you've had over the last 35 years. Ted Carroll, President of Leadership Greater Hartford, thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, real pleasure to be with you, Lynn. Thank you.
I'm Lynn Townsend. Thank you so much for joining us for this Rich Answers podcast. You can find more of them on iTunes. This show produced by Carol Vassar-Pettit for Cause Communications, a division of the Conference of Churches, Hartford, Connecticut. Copyright 2012.